Hi everybody, it is September 25th. No, it's not. It's August 25th. Okay. And today is the feast of a Discalced Carmelite saint, the same community of our Saint Therese of Lisieux. And she was a Palestinian who was born in Palestine in a place called Abayin. And she has a fascinating story. I mean, her poor parents, who were Palestinian Greek Catholics. Now, what that means is that some of us don't realize that in the Catholic Church, Roman Catholics are only one rite, R-I-T-E, in the Catholic Church. There are also Catholic churches that are called Melkite or Ruthenian or Byzantine or Maronite or Syro-Malabar, all these different rites throughout the world. These are all Catholics, but their masses look nothing like the Roman rite, which is what we are used to. If you went to a Byzantine Catholic church, which there is one in Williamsburg, by the way, the Church of the Ascension. In Williamsburg, there's a Byzantine Catholic church. The Mass looks nothing like ours at all. Looks more like a Greek Orthodox liturgy, but it is Catholic. It's a Byzantine Catholic church. And so if you went to the Byzantine Catholic Church, you could receive communion because all the Eastern Catholic churches, like the Byzantine, etc., and the Melkites, they're all in union with us and in Rome under the leadership of Pope Francis. So that's a little detail that most Roman Catholics don't realize. We're not the only Catholics on the map that are part of the one true Catholic Church. So anyway, our saint today, whose name was Mariam Bawardi, she was a Palestinian, as I said, and her family were Melkite Catholics, Melkite Rite Catholics in Palestine. Her poor parents, this is unbelievable, get ready for this. They had 12 sons, interesting apostolic number, but none of them survived infancy. Can you imagine? All 12 sons died. And so the poor parents went on a pilgrimage about 70 miles away to Bethlehem, in desperation over their loss. And there they prayed, and then they conceived again, and our saint was born. And they proceeded to have another boy after her 2 years later. They named their daughter in thanksgiving after the Blessed Virgin Mary. But when Mariam was only 3 years old and her brother was 1 year old, both of her parents died within a few days of each other of some illness. So she was separated from her brother. She was adopted by her paternal uncle. He was adopted by someone on the mother's side of the family, and she never saw her brother again. They were separated when she was 3, he was 1. So she was raised by her uncle in Egypt in pretty comfortable circumstances, and as was the custom, he had prearranged her to marry somebody. But the night before her wedding, she felt called not to marry, but to offer her life to God. Well, her uncle flew into a rage at this and beat her severely. Miriam is a real saint patron, really, for women who have been abused, because this was not the only time she was abused. So her uncle beat her severely and continued to mistreat her in the time to come. And she felt very depressed and alone, of course. So she attempted to write her brother, who was then living in Nazareth, to come visit her. Never happened. because the young male servant who was going to carry the letter to Nazareth, he asked her the reason for her sadness. And she told him, and so then he attempted to woo her for himself and invited her to convert to Islam. She, of course, refused. So then he cuts her throat. 4-inch wide cut in her throat, and dumped her body in an alley. Now this is where it gets really interesting, because Miriam regarded this as a miracle for the rest of her life, which it certainly seems to be. So her throat was slit 4 inches wide. Her voice throughout the rest of her life was affected by that cut, and there was a French doctor who measured it to be 4 inches wide. But anyway, so she's dumped in an alley, and the next thing she knows is that a mysterious, quote, nun dressed in blue, end quote, brought her to a grotto, which she could never identify subsequently, stitched her wounds, and took care of her for a month. And Miriam went on from there and worked for many years as a servant in various places. But finally, she entered the Discalced Carmelite community, the Discalced Carmelite monastery in Pau in France. The Discalced Carmelite nuns are the most austere religious order in the church for women. And she entered Carmel at Pau, and then she was among the founding group of Discalced Carmelite nuns who founded the first Discalced Carmelite monastery in Mangalore, India. Then she eventually returned to France, and from there she went back home and she built the first Carmelite monastery in Bethlehem, where she lived for the rest of her life. She built that in 1875 when our Saint Therese, back in France, was 2 years old. Miriam, whose name as a Discalced Carmelite nun was Sister Mary of Jesus Crucified, she was noted for her supernatural gifts, especially her humility, her devotion to the Holy Spirit, and her devotion to the Church and to the Pope. So she died when our Saint Therese was 5 years old, in the Carmel in Bethlehem that she had founded. That's the fascinating story of Saint Mary of Jesus Crucified, whom Pope Francis canonized a few years ago. So, on Sunday, we have Adult Sunday School at 9:15 in the meeting room. I'm going to be showing a great documentary film. Well, not a documentary film, but it's a great film about the Trinity by Bishop Robert Barron. Some of you are familiar with the famous Bishop Robert Barron. It's a beautiful video about the Trinity. All are welcome, 9:15 in the meeting room on Sunday. And this book here is the most recent book that I know of, written by Mother Teresa, written about Mother Teresa of Calcutta. To Love and to Be Loved. It was written by a man named Jim Toohey, who was a longtime associate, friend, and co-worker with Mother Teresa. And Jim Toohey is coming to our parish on September 27th. He's going to be at our parish to give a presentation. And we're going to have a nice reception afterwards, and this book will be available to be purchased. All the proceeds will go to Aging with Dignity, which is a charity for to assist the elderly, the sick, and the mental and the handicapped, that Jim Toohey is CEO of. So he's going to be coming, and so I also want to say that he'll be here on that evening, September 27th, and I want to offer to anybody out there, if you would like to do so, to have the privilege of hosting him overnight at your house. I thought that would be a real nice way to welcome Jim Toohey, is to be at a parishioner's home. So if anyone would like to offer to do that, please let me know. That would be the evening of September 27th. And and I'll see y'all in church.